Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and it's time for another look at one of Formula One's most underrated drivers. This being the 16th episode in the series, make sure you check out some of the previous episodes in the playlist. Today we are looking at Roberto Moreno, and this is the third time this week I've mentioned him. But let's take a look at why this seemingly decent driver was never given a chance in Formula One and what went wrong when he was given that chance. This is the story of the career of Roberto Moreno. So sit back, relax, and let's begin.
Welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport.
Born in 1959 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Roberto Moreno had some success in Brazilian karting series before moving to Europe in 1979 and racing in Formula Ford. He was lent a shed by former Walt owner Ron Tormerac. He'd signed for the Van Diemen Works team and had a lot of success, including the British Championship and winning the 1980 Formula Ford Festival. His career was almost over then as he didn't have enough money to race, but his lower Formula success caught the eye of Lotus F1 owner Colin Chapman, who gave Moreno a testing contract and enough money to continue in the sport. And despite still being low on funds, Roberto Moreno would win races all over the world, including British Formula 3, Formula Atlantic in America, as well as 3 Australian Grand Prix in the country's pre-F1 days. It was still a big event, and Moreno beat former and future champions such as Nelson Piquet, Jacques Lafitte, Alain Jones and Keke Rosberg. These many successes was enough to convince Chapman to let Roberto Moreno race for Lotus in Formula 1, replacing the injured Nigel Mansell who had broken his wrist in Canada. It was a disaster, and did a lot of damage to Moreno's reputation. He had barely driven the Lotus 91, having only driven older models in testing, and it had a reputation for being a difficult car to handle. Moreno failed to qualify for the race over 2 seconds off the time required, and at the end of 1982 was released from his Lotus contract. Undeterred, Roberto Moreno would go back to America for 1983 and finish second behind Michael Andretti in the Formula Mondial North American Cup for Theodore Racing, who Moreno's wins temporarily kept the team alive in the series before moving to Agapo Racing. He moved back to Europe for 1984 and had his one and only go at the Le Mans 24-hour race in a Skull Bandit Porsche, as well as finishing second in the European Formula 2 Championship for Waltz Racing, being beaten by teammate Mike Fackwell. In 1985, he'd make his debuts in the International Formula 3000 series for Baron Racing, as well as kart in America with Gulls Racing. He'd score points in both, but not have a lot of overall success. He'd commit to kart for 1986, and scored some decent points finishes. But in 1987, he'd have a full year of Formula 3000 with the Works Walk team, and Moreno would take a win and 4 podiums on his way to 3rd overall, losing out to Stefano Modena and Luis Perez Sala, who would also end up in Formula 1. This good performance would lead to a return to Formula 1, replacing Pascal Faber at AGS. He was slowest of everyone and only made it onto the grid because Mansell pulled out, but he put in an okay performance in Japan before retiring with an electrical issue. Before an even better go at the final round in Australia, where Moreno finished 7th. Senna was disqualified for illegal brake ducts, and Roberto Moreno would score his and AGS's first points in Formula 1. It wouldn't be enough to score a Formula 1 drive for 1988 though, and Roberto Moreno instead returned to the International F3000 Championship with Bromley Motorsport. The team had no money, but Moreno would take 4 wins in the sponsorless car and win the 1988 Championship, one of the greatest upset stories in motorsport history, as F3000 was highly competitive. Finally, an F1 drive would be waiting for Moreno in 1989.
As he turns to the right for shell turn and then to the left, and the man with the checkered flag is waiting for him, and Roberto Moreno comes through to score his 5th ever Formula 3000 win, his 4th of the season.
No big teams would give the International F3000 champion a race seat in Formula 1 for 1989, but Moreno would sign a test contract with Ferrari, who helped him get a drive with the also Italian Coloni team. It was a tough year with the car not being very competitive. Moreno would only qualify for 4 races and retire from all of them. He'd signed for the hopeless Eurobrun team for 1990, where he'd only qualified for 2 races early in the year, and that seemed to be that when the Eurobrun team folded with 2 races to go in the 1990 season.
Another man with problems in pre-qualifying, Brazilian Roberto Moreno. His Euro run left the track at the same point. If anything, a more dramatic exit. It hasn't been the happiest of German Grand Prix for Moreno. He missed the first half hour of the session when his car was completely rewired.
But Alessandro Nannini was involved in a helicopter crash and was left with a nearly severed arm, which handed his Benetton drive, sorry, that was in poor taste, gave his Benetton drive to Roberto Moreno to partner good friend Nelson Piquet for the last 2 races. Roberto Moreno seized the opportunity by finishing second, behind Piquet for a Benetton 1-2 and Moreno's best ever result in Formula 1. He finished 7th at the final round and was kept at Benetton for 1991. This looked like the opportunity Roberto Moreno had been waiting for, a front-running team to show what he can do. But unfortunately the Benetton was not as competitive as it seemed. He also played second fiddle to Piquet, who had eyesight problems and was way past his peak. He scored points at a few races, but disaster happened at Spa when Moreno finished 4th and set fastest lap. But the day was overshadowed by the debut of a young German upstart. Michael Schumacher in a Jordan managed to qualify 7th before breaking down on the first lap. Benetton hired him immediately and sacked poor Roberto Moreno, who would end up taking the Jordan seat for a couple of rounds, qualifying well in Italy before spinning out of the race and only managing 10th in Portugal. He took the Minardi seat for the last race of the year, finishing 16th, and would then spend 1992 with Andrea Moda, qualifying once before the end came again at Spa. That seemed to be it for Moreno, who moved to Italian and French touring cars for 1993 and 1994, getting some good results. But in 1995 he returned to Formula 1 for one last time with the ambitious 40 team, mostly because of his Brazilian heritage, but it was again a tough year of being a back marker. He'd get a best 14th at Belgium before spinning in the pit lane at his final Formula 1 race at Adelaide.
102 Grand Prix. Oh, Roberto Moreno has spun it.
What is going on here? Moreno's right rear suspension is broken. That's why he will probably not take any more part in today's events.
Roberto Moreno moved back to America and the kart series in 1996, making his first start in the series since 1986. He'd score a podium at the 500, the Michigan 500 that is, but had little success in the overall standings for the next few years, as he only made several appearances throughout 97 and 98 with various teams. He'd raced the majority of the 1999 kart series, putting in good performances with the Pac West team before moving to Newman Haas and getting a second place near season's end. This would earn him a drive with Patrick Racing for a full season in the year 2000. He started with a second place at Miami and led the standings for most of the year, taking his first overall win since winning the International F3000 Championship 12 years previously. He wept on the radio, which is one of the most beautiful and sincere things in motorsport ever, but he'd hit a bad patch late on in the year and would only finish 3rd overall by year's end. He'd win a second race at Vancouver in 2001, but had a rough year and finished 13th. He would have a final full year in 2003 with Herdez competition, but didn't have much success and retired from motorsport at the end of the year. He has had a few sporadic appearances in motorsport since, and even tested the Panos Champ car for Pacific Coast Motorsport, and even lived up to his super sub name when he got to race Dakar in 2007, finishing 12th in Houston after replacing Alex Feig.
Little Roberto Moreno, one of the best attitudes in the series. Checkered flag is out for him. Win number 2 for Roberto.
You did it, buddy!
That is the 27th win for Patrick Racing.
So why do I think Roberto Moreno is underrated? He only ever scored 15 points in Formula 1, only made the podium once. Out of 75 races, he only qualified for 42. But he was a driver who just couldn't get a decent drive. No one could have done any better than Moreno for teams like Eurobrun, Colony, 40 and Andrea Moda. It was just a shame that he got his chance too early in his career with Lotus and at the wrong time with Benetton, because he was capable of so much more. Winning the International F3000 for the tiny and skint Bromley Motorsport is incredibly impressive, as is his constant decent performances with low budget teams in other series. He never had a lot of success, but was always considered a decent enough talent to get the drives he got in both car and Formula 1. No one doubted his ability, except when compared to Michael Schumacher, I guess. I have no doubt that Roberto Moreno is underrated. Thank you for watching and helping me get to 100 subscribers. Keep checking back for new content. Remember to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't. And with that, thanks again and have a good one.